Now, one of the most polarizing films of the 21st century is the 2001 film Donnie Darko, the debut feature from Richard Kelly starring Jake Gyllenhaal. Some say it's genius, some say it's pretentious nonsense. Both have merit, and I want to look at both views and come to my own conclusion on the film, splitting the video into positives and negatives of the film. Let's start with the positives, the acting. For the most part, the acting in the film is very solid and well done. Gyllenhaal gives a really great performance which could have not worked given the type of role he was given. However, he is a real strong point of the film and I think conveys the teen angst and tone of the film really well. The rest of the cast gives a really solid performance as well, even if the dialogue is sometimes really goofy, which I'll talk about later.
I like your boobs.
Now, the film's dialogue is sometimes really goofy and feels off, however, it could be justified in my opinion if the film falls into two things. The first of that being the film being Donnie's schizophrenia, which would explain, in my opinion, why the dialogue feels so off and certain elements feel weird. Like Donnie not knowing how he can get a girlfriend, and thus the new girl in his school falls for him, due to his teacher saying,
next to the boy you think is the cutest.
which of course is a really weird thing for a teacher to say, and why Donnie's life gets better, from flooding the school to burning down Cunningham's home, gets Cunningham in jail, Bridges' collection. Thus Donnie fantasizes of fighting against the authority of the school and Cunningham. Thus he embarrasses him in front of everyone, and would explain why he's the only person that can see Frank, which we can see Donnie's sister asks him who he's talking to in the bathroom.
Who are you talking to?
And the therapist referring to Frank as Donnie's imaginary friend, and Donnie having these illusions of grandeur as I'm having to save the world from ending, and seeing these things, such as the predetermined vectors coming out of people's chests. And due to us only seeing things from Donnie's perspective, we also aren't able to tell what's fiction and reality, thus they both seamlessly go together. Thus Donnie being in this interpretation an unreliable narrator. The film does have some hints too, like Donnie saying he hopes to find his answers in his sleep.
I can only hope that the answers will come to me in my sleep.
I'm shooting Frank in his fantasy, perhaps due to his hatred of his sister, which we see very early on in the film. The idea perhaps stemming from, and the film foreshadowing, the eye poster in his room, which does appear to be a right eye, the same eye which Frank shot through. And the world coming to an end, not to being the actual world coming to an end, his world come to an end, aka him die. Or another one being that due to him avoiding his death when he was predetermined to die, that's why everyone is so strange, and thus this bizarre feel to the world. From the unnatural dialogue, the lessons the teachers give, which feel a bit off, and just the way everybody acts. Peter Donnie surviving when he shouldn't have, thus the film being much more about free will and determinism, and Donnie going back does indeed save the world, as he had to die in order for the world to continue as normal, and save the people he cared about. And of course the film was, I don't think is shot that creatively. In my opinion, there are scenes, some unique interesting shots, like the shots of the eye, or the school in the sky scene. Of course, Frank being an iconic piece of iconography from the film, whether visually or his voice, with him often being in the film's strongest scenes in my opinion. Now for the negatives of the film. I talked about the dialogue earlier, which I posited a theory as to why it sounds like that. However, it could also just be shoddy writing, which is very possible given Richard Kelly's next films, which were very disappointing. His infamous film Southland Tales, which was just a complete mess. It does feel as though perhaps Richard Kelly either fluked a great film, perhaps due to strong cast members, the ambition of the film, and the complicated nature of the film, giving it a feel of mystique and intrigue, and the studio interference, which made him cut out stuff, which considering his director's cut, which is considered the inferior version of the film, by many, gives this criticism merit, and I think foreshadowed his career to come, where he had more control he probably shouldn't have had, thus the disparity between his theatrical cut and the director's cut, which eliminated certain ideas like the psychiatrist using a placebo from Donnie's drugs in the director's cut, thus cutting out any ambiguity as to whether or not what's happening is real or Donnie's drug and mind-fueled fantasies and dreams, which he wouldn't be the only director to have one good film and the rest be mediocre and straight up bad. Another thing is the film's pseudoscience, some of which does come across as pretentious or full of itself, like it's the first film to deal with these topics, which it isn't, and makes the film feel complicated, which is a fair criticism as sometimes you are wondering what is exactly happening and what's happening and why. The film, while tackling these big themes and subjects, and can be overly complicated, sometimes can be quite simplistic to its detriment. In its tackling of themes, with the love and fear being the most obvious themes, which it tackles, in my opinion, in quite a conformist way without much unique perspective on those themes, which is similar with the cinematography, which is quite bland for the most part, despite it tackling these big ambitious ideas with elements of time travel, free will, and determinism. Richard Kelly reminds me of a George Lucas type of director, when he has these big ambitious ideas. However, he needs to be reined in by the studio, otherwise they go over the top and make a dud like the prequels with Lucas and Kelly's later films. And the film's ending, some can be seen as unsatisfying, due to it just kind of ending, and not in a grandiose manner, which left a lot of people who watched the film feel as though it negates all of Donnie's actions, and essentially makes his story and journey pointless. Overall, Donnie Darko is a very polarizing film, with its positives and negatives. However, in my opinion, it's a good/great film, not without its flaws, mind you. Of course, especially for a director's debut, it was very good. However, it's also a cautionary tale as to why directors should be reined in, as sometimes, especially as you can see, the difference between the theatrical cut, which had artistic ambiguity and left the film up to interpretation in a good way, versus the director's cut did tend to overly explain and leave the film feeling fully solved, finally to people not wanting to revisit the film. In my opinion, great first debut film.